Hi, Tessabella.
Hello, Nika.
Thank you for talking to me in advance of the BGJ Seminar Day, which is going to take place on November the 1st, and you're going to be our presenter.
Yes, yes, I'm very grateful for this opportunity to share this in particular. Yeah.
Hmm. Well, to introduce you a little bit to the people who might be interested and who are watching us, you've really spent your life dedicated it to education, but also psychotherapy and research. So, you spent almost 20 years teaching. You then did a master's, then did a PhD, and really kind of in that process started exploring, okay, how is it that we raise boys? What is it that we do with them? And what is it that we might need to do more of? Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes, so the the boys' work really started when I went to Alan Shaw's seminar day
Hmm.
in 2017.
Hmm.
However, it was, I didn't take it up straight away.
Right.
There's a kind of thing that I expected that other people would take it up. I was busy with my courses that I wrote and run and was training people. And then when I retired and handed over a lot of my work, this question of the boys hadn't been taken up by anyone. So you can find the information, but it's from 2017.
Right.
And it's even more critical now with new information. For example, um, the crime rates and the difference between the men and the women and what they are struggling with. And the fact that autism rates have increased incredibly. I know that there's uh, a bit of argument about why that should be, and a lot of researchers like to say, well, there are other things to take into account, like different measures, or it's more known, or so on. But still, it's too high,
Hmm.
much too high. And then when you look at the numbers of men in prison with learning difficulties and autism and this list of mental health problems,
Hmm.
it's just way too high to let it go. We
Right. So
need to know.
I can already really get a sense of your passion for this work, and I'd like to kind of ask you to give us how, in a bit of a context, how did this passion take you to that work? Because you had a whole other career in researching, your PhD was on morality. Something happened for you with this particular work that you saw by Alan Shore that really seems to have sparked a professional passion.
Yeah. So the first thing that happened to me on working with the facts
Hmm.
was the enormous sense of compassion.
Hmm.
So the way that Alan Shaw says that the development of the brain is affected by the boy's um, natural testosterone levels, that causes a set of circumstances that leads the boys into situations that they are not prepared for.
Hmm.
And we know that boys are 2 years behind in their development um, as far as cognition and managing studies at school and so on. That is a bit of a disguise if we say 2 years behind. It's actually a serious difficulty for them because of their anxiety.
Right.
And if they didn't have that anxiety, what would it be like then?
Hmm.
And how much broader would their life experience be? So it's this issue of men being afraid, actually. So definitely boys are extremely anxious, and a lot of the things that they try and do and the choices they make for how to cope with their anxiety lead them into problems.
Hmm.
And so, as a psychotherapist and also as a teacher of children who had big difficulties with school, and we took the children who had a history of violence in school, and uh, the kind of child that couldn't manage being with people that didn't have full compassion for them. And that as soon as we were able to make them feel at home and non-threatened, and having a way of working with them that didn't involve punishment, we could experience the difference in them and they could experience the difference in themselves. And this is the point.
Hmm.
We don't have compassion for difficult boys and men. In fact, their difficulty is that we don't have understanding and compassion for men.
Right. Thank you. I am, the gestaltist in me, when I hear you talk, really wants to engage with what you're saying in the context of what we refer as to kind of the current field, but all the forces and constraints that kind of operate in the world around us. And I'm wondering about, why is this work particularly important now in this point in time? You mentioned some things about the increased rates of difficulties, but
So that's definitely the one side of it, that the situation is not improving. It is getting worse, and you can see it in the graphs. What does happen, which is absolutely wonderful, is that when somebody's inspired by compassion, they make a huge difference. So we learn of a few programs where somebody's gone into prison and worked with really seriously dangerous people, but from the point of view of compassion and what it opens up for them. It reminds me of this experience of learning to love if you didn't learn it naturally. So that's the big part of my work that I was doing before.
mm,
That when you can be opened up to being able to look at these different aspects of the other and to not try and make them into something that you expect them to be. So not what's in your head, but much more, what am I getting out of who they are? Then you can start waking up compassion.
mm,
And you can wake up compassion as soon as you stop trying to force them to be something. So we have to be a bit courageous and let the other go and be who they are. And that wakens us up to them. Yeah. So that was my personal experience. So I'll tell you a little bit about my childhood. So my mother was um, really disadvantaged by her background. Her mother had died when she was 3, her grandmother died when she was 5. After that, she wasn't really wanted by anyone. And that meant that her ability as a mother was very weak, but she wanted to do what was right in her mind. But that didn't include a loving relationship. And when my little sister was born, I was 3 years old. My mother wasn't very interested in the birth of my sister. And I looked at this little baby and I was overcome with a sense of love, which I think is unusual in a child of my, at 3. And I just wanted to watch her all the time and see how she moved and when she looked at anything, and that's a big thing for opening up the capacity for love. And then life was tough, and I tried my best in everything that I did, and then I had another opportunity of developing this capacity to love in myself. So it's not as if I wasn't empathic or affectionate or anything like that before, but being brought up in this really restricted way where you know that the other person with you doesn't love you, doesn't actually like you, but you still want to be included. So there you are. So this was really big for me.
Mm.
Yeah. Mm.
Thank you for sharing that.
Mm.
I have to ask now that you did, and given the number of times you said what some of your work is about,
Yeah.
how come did you come by the last name Lovemore? Because
Right.
so fitting for what you're talking about.
Yes, and that could mean anything, couldn't it?
Hmm.
To love more. So it's a historical name, and it what it meant at the time was that it was a favored concubine or something like that. But I met David Lovemore when I was 16, and there's the story.
Well, it suits you very well.
Yeah, yeah. I think we grow into our names.
Hmm.
Mm.
I noticed when you spoke about the way you interact with men and boys in a way to invite them into a space of more compassion, pure compassion. And when you spoke about your own experience, I noticed kind of the importance of having the ability for someone to really see you and see how you see the world that you keep talking about. And again, the Gestaltist in me starts thinking about phenomenology as which is one of our core principles. Yet at the same time, the work that you talk about, a lot of it sounds a bit also kind of biologically essentialist, of a sort of boys are born this way, this is biological, this is factual. And I'm wondering how you combine the two, how you make sense of the two.
Yes, well, I would say up until 2017, I didn't have that understanding. I didn't know what was more about nature, and clearly, I'd always really understood what nurture was about. It was very apparent to me, especially when I was working with these children that had struggled so much with their lives. And you could just tell, week one, week two, week three, week four, completely different because of nurture. And you sort of accept nature. So some people are good at some things and some people aren't, and that sort of thing. But understanding that it starts with literally the Y chromosome, which determines the fact that there is going to be testosterone. And from then on, that path has already been formed as far as nature is concerned, so that the consequences are not what are men like in their 30s, but the consequences are from birth or still from pregnancy. And the way that the nature side works, the nurturing side, that is the destiny of whether you've landed in a good spot or a more difficult spot, because how you're going to react to it is very much affected by the biological side, especially in the case of boys. Now, we're talking about boys, But girls can have the same difficulties in their lives and they manage better. They do. They are more inclined to accept the conditions they're in and try and adapt, and boys can't.
Mm.
So in all my work, I've gone back to the neuroscience. So, for example, I was developing this work in how you find capacity to love and how you find capacity to love someone you don't like or that you would normally avoid or someone that you live with and so on. So then that was really through exercise and experiencing the first door that opens is compassion. And then you get to the point over time where you're in awe of the person that you first disliked. So now, if I look at the neuroscience, I can see that the biology sets us up. We can have this arrangement of hormones, this arrangement of endorphins and the dopamine and the serotonin and so on. But how we live will maintain that, deplete it, or increase it. So the fact that we're doing the therapy without knowing about that is fantastic. What clever people we were to do that.
I was going to ask you, from the perspective of therapists, because I imagine most people who will attend your seminar day will be therapists.
Hmm.
What is the bit that you say, oh, we should really know as therapists about this, even if we're not working with boys, if we're working with grown men and we might like them or not like them.
Mm. Yes. So the major discoveries for me have, by going back through the neuroscience, is really to get to understand what is this reaction that we have when we're in danger. And when you're a baby, being in danger might be being left to cry to yourself to sleep. So if we have no knowledge of this, we could be following a principle of get them used to going to sleep on their own and that sort of thing. But what we know now is we have been wearing out their nervous systems and they are going to be living more in a state of hypervigilance than they could have if they'd had a more, well, a slower introduction to danger. And it also affects learning. Our learning is just cut off by fear and anxiety and so on. And in ordinary life, we don't understand to what extent we frighten each other. And most of the reasons why we frighten each other is because we had to learn to stand up for ourselves in a dangerous relationship. So we learned to be frightening. Yeah, so that was a major discovery for me to have it confirmed in a different way, like I said, to find out that nervous system, and then to find it out in other ways that the body works. And there's one thing for me that is always a real help and real hope, and that is our lifestyle, our aggression, our lack of empathy can deplete people of their capacity even to be well. But if we make changes, and they're not huge changes, then we can start seeing them get well. We can see that children who were coming out of school looking grey in the face which people think, oh, they're tired, their blood sugar's low. But actually, it's their life that's being threatened and their immune systems are breaking down. So if we just make some small changes, they come out of school rosy-cheeked, happy, full of energy for after school. Yeah. So that's the hope. Yeah.
That's quite a positive note for us to finish on.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for talking to me, Tessabella. And for everybody watching us, you can join us for the BGJ Seminar Day with Dr. Tessabella Lovemore. November the 1st, it's online. You can book through the BGJ website. So please join us for the seminar. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in November.
Thank you.